All right, so now we're moving forward into the Bible, and we're moving out of the book of Exodus. We're moving into the book of Numbers. Again, the Bible is made up of 66 books, but has one author, and that author is God. God wrote everything that's in there. He just did it through people. So remember that the nation of Israel started with the 12 sons of Jacob. Over 430 years later, by the time that Moses saved the Israelites from the Egyptians, the Israelite people were numerous. God told Moses to take a census of all the men aged 20 and older who were able to go to war. That number was 603,550. That did not take into account any females or males under the age of 20. That's from Numbers chapter 1, verses 1 to 46. Okay, so God told Moses, look, take a census of males in Israel that are over 20 and able to go to war. Now, what I'm going to tell you next isn't in the Bible, okay? But I heard a lot of different researchers who said they kind of believe that there might have been about 2 million Israelites that God moved out of being slavery in Egypt with Moses. Because this 603,000 people in the census, these are only males over 20 who are able to go to war. It didn't include any males under 20. It didn't include males who weren't able to go to war. And it didn't include any females at all. So they, from what I heard, and again, this isn't from the Bible, so just, take it with a grain of salt. They think there might have been, when they moved Israelites out of Egypt, like about 2 million of them. But anyways, there were 603,550 of them that were over 20 who could go to war. Now, the tribe of Levi were excluded from the census of men able to go to war. Instead, God assigned the men of the tribe of Levi to be guard over the tabernacle of testimony, and they were assigned later to be priests under Aaron. So just so the fact that they're assigned to be priests under Aaron, it shows that God must have forgiven Aaron for agreeing with the Israelites. Yeah, let's make a false god. Give me your gold and I'll make you a golden calf to worship. He did that. But apparently God must have corrected him and forgiven him, because it says that Aaron will later lead the priests. And you could read that in Numbers chapter 1, verses 47 to 54, and chapter 3, verses 1 to 39. Now, while the Israelites were in Egypt, they made this tent called the tent of the tabernacle. And in the day, God would hover over the tent in the form of a cloud. God would come down and hover over this tent, and it would be this big cloud, and everybody would see it, and it was God. At night, God would come down in the form of this big ball of fire over the tent of the tabernacle. Now, in the day, this didn't happen at night because they couldn't see where they're going. In the day, when God wanted the Israelite camp to move somewhere, this cloud, who is God, would start moving. And all the people would say, oh, God's moving. We need to follow him, So they'd pick up their camp and they'd follow this cloud wherever it went until he got to a point where he wanted them to settle down there for a little while. The cloud would stop moving. They would set their camp back up, and they would stay there as long as God was there as a cloud. And when God started moving again, they'd say, oh, God wants us to move again. And they would pick up and follow this cloud, who was God. And eventually, till he took them to the land of Canaan. And that was in Numbers chapter 9, verses 15 to 23. Now, one day, God told Moses to select 12 men, one prince from each of the 12 tribes of Israel, and send them into the land of Canaan, which is the land he was giving them, to act as spies. And God instructed them as spies to specifically do this, just do this, find out this information. What kind of land is the land of Canaan? Are there people living there that are strong or weak? Are they few or many? Is the country in which they live in good or bad? Are the towns in which they dwell in open or fortified? Is the soil fertile or barren, wooded or clear? And God asked them to find this out in Numbers chapter 13, verses 17 and 20. What God did not instruct them to do was to go out and check out the inhabitants in the land of Canaan that he was going to give them. And if they thought that the people there were too strong for God to move them out, they could decide, yeah, we don't want to do it. We don't think God can move them out. So, yeah, we don't want to enter the land like you're telling us to, God. He didn't tell them to do that, okay? He just said, find out this information. This was a test by God to see if the Israelites would trust him, sending the spies in to find out this information. And Canaan was the land that God intended to give to the Israelites to live in. However, Canaan was presently inhabited by people who God said were sinful and evil, the Canaanites. They did all these pagan practices which are horrible. They didn't follow God, and these pagan practices included child sacrifice and human sacrifice. But they would have to be moved out of the land for the Israelites to take over the land that God wanted them to take over and live in. Now, when the spies returned after gathering the information about the land of Canaan for 40 days, this was their report. All of them said the land of Canaan was a very good land. It was flowing with milk and honey. However, all of them except one said that the people there were very strong, the cities were fortified, and there were men of great height living there, and they don't think that they should go in and try to take over the land. One of the spies, though, named Caleb, however, told the people, hey, forget what they're saying. We need to go in and take this land. God said that he's going to give it to us, and if God said it, he could do it. We need to do this as God's telling us to. But the other 11 spies kept insisting to the people of Israel that they would fail in their attempt to take the land of Canaan as God instructed them to, because they thought the people that were living there were too strong. And you can read that in Numbers chapter 13, 1 to 33. So therefore, as a group, probably not everyone, but the majority of the Israelites decided that, yeah, God either could not or would not help them defeat the people of Canaan and move them out, even though it was God who told them that they would give them this land and told them to go into it and kick these people out. The Israelites then became angry at Moses and God, not remembering that God could save them from anyone he wanted to because he was all-powerful. Now, these were the same people that witnessed God do the 10 plagues to free them from Egypt where they were slaves, and part the Red Sea, and crush, and then bring the Red Sea down and crush the whole Egyptian army. These are the same people that saw that and know what God could do, but they're going, yeah, I don't think you can move these people out. Let's not go in. What weak faith. And again, why should we know this? Because we're human just like they are. We could have moments of weak faith too, but we need to learn what happens to people. When you read the Bible, you learn when people do certain things, what's the outcome with God? Is it a good outcome? Well, then do that. If it is a bad outcome, I learned from what I read in there, I shouldn't do that. So here, if God tells you to do something, you do it. Okay, you don't decide, I don't think I should do that. I don't think God can help me with that. As a result of this, God said, okay, turn around. You're not going to go into the land of Canaan. I'm not going to allow you in there because you don't believe I could do it. Instead, God had them wander around the wilderness for 40 years until all the people who rebelled against God's instructions to take the land of Canaan died off. It would be their children that would be the one that would enter the land that God promised them, that he would give them the land of Canaan. Now, some of the Israelites rebelled against this too. So when God said, go in there and take the land, I will be with you, they said, no, we're not going to do that. So then God said, okay, you're not going in there. You're going to wander, you're going to stay out here until you all die off and your children will take it over. And then they go, yeah, no, we don't like that either. Let's go and we're going to take the land of Canaan by ourselves. We don't need you, God. Well, they tried to take it without God and they were defeated horribly. The certain groups that tried that because God wasn't with them. You can read that in Numbers chapter 14, verses 1 to 45. Now, while the Israelites were in the land of Shittim, during their 40 years of wandering,